I would also like to start by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which we meet, the Turrbal and Yagara people, and pay my respects to their elders, past, present and emerging. And I'd also like to pay my respects to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people who are with us today and who are part of our research and knowledge community. So this morning I'm going to spend some time talking not about engineering and not about science. And I'm going to do that for two reasons. One is I'm not an engineer, although I am a scientist originally. And the second reason is because there is a context going on around your work that's pretty interesting. And it's particularly interesting at the moment when the person sitting next to you or the person across from you on the bus is not exposed to the same information and the same truth as you are through your social media and knowledge engagement. And so the questions, like Rebecca was just asking, of how do we persuade people, how do we bring people along, how do we get support for the energy transition, is actually much, much, much more complicated than it was 10 or 15 years ago. So why am I talking about this? And why is this lady in a pink dress at your conference? I'm one of those really broad, shallow people. And by that I mean I started my career as a veterinary surgeon. I graduated from the University of Queensland and I spent 8 years in country practice, and I worked on the early stages of farm management, whole farm management planning, when vets got into farm management consultancy. Lots of challenging conversations because things die, things don't go well. You learn to deal with lots and lots of human emotion. I then spent a fair bit of time in government, starting in agriculture and moving across to environment. So environment's a great area of government. You get to mediate disputes all the time. You can't possibly be thanked for doing a good job because you have made nobody happy. But what you can be appreciated for is innovation in making things that are good happen more quickly, better protection of certain things, actually facilitating business. And from there, I got into the energy transition, I get into major infrastructure and other things like that. After leaving government just over 10 years ago, I worked as a consultant and advisor, finishing that career about 2 years ago, working at McKinsey and running their global sustainability practice for public sector clients. So looking at whole countries and governments and foreign affairs departments and how the energy transition and the transition to net zero would happen globally. And also working on some leadership work that's turned into this little gig that I've got with UQ. And lastly, I'm on the board of CS Energy, which, if you're from Queensland, you'll know is one of our more challenging generation assets, because there was a significant event nearly 5 years ago now that resulted in a turbine blowing up and taking a very long time to rebuild. So CS Energy is a legacy generator, coal-fired. We also have announced this week our gas peaking plant that we're building out at Chinchilla with APA. We have a couple of BESSs in the network, and we have some wind farms under construction and lots and lots and lots of solar PPAs. So that's why I'm here with you today. So welcome the opportunity for you all to ask lots and lots of questions as we go. I'm going to talk about three things and then leave you with some questions as researchers and as people who are deep on solar and knowledgeable and actually at the real cutting edge of making the energy transition happen. So just starting, this is the Integrated Systems Plan from AEMO. You've all seen this inside out, backwards. And what you can see on here that people have started to talk about this year, or maybe last year, is it's an energy transition, not an energy switch. And that's a really important framing for how we talk to the community about what's going on, because those wedges are incredibly optimistic, as you all know, for deployment in Australia. And it also goes for the next 25 years, which means I'm going to be 80 by the time we get to the end of the chart, and all of you are going to be 25 years older. And so what I'm about to say is going to matter for you and your work for the next 25 years, because it is not going to be quick, it is not going to be easy, it's technically complicated, and there's lots and lots and lots of people involved. So I won't do a lecture on the ISP. I've gone too far away from the thingy. Oh, man. There we go. Okay, so just looking at this system then, the people who are involved in it matter a lot. And I just wanted to share a couple of perspectives from some of the people that I work with that might be news to you, or you might know it all already. I'm not sure. So these are all people who work in the Queensland energy generation sector. They're in fact people who are interested in how to get BESS projects built super quickly. And they are at Kogan Creek Power Station learning about how the first BESS in the Queensland network got built on time, on budget with Tesla technology. And these are the people who live in a whole bunch of regional communities in Queensland who are engaged in a conversation about what kind of jobs am I going to have for the next 10, 20, 30 years? What kind of community am I going to be making and going to be part of? And what kind of opportunities are there for my children? So their drivers are really, really different from the drivers of people like me who live in Brisbane, across the river, inner city, well-educated, end of career. Completely different perspectives, but really, really important knowledge about how the existing generation assets work, what you can do with them, what you can't do with them, how to change them, how to bring in solar, and all kinds of other amazing things. So that's one group. And they're everywhere in Australia, in all of the historical generating communities. And they need to be confident that when policy wonks and advisors say there will be jobs in the future, that they can sort of see what those jobs might be and understand what that might mean for their children. This is another group of people who I work with. So I work with the Southern Queensland Landscapes NRM body. I'm actually the chair of that. So NRM bodies look after land management and custodianship. We run projects around river protection, koala protection. We distribute state government money in the country. And these are two of my fellow board members, our minister and one of our staff at a recent launch. And when you look at these people, you'll notice something. They're not the same people as you'll see in an urban context or a conference like this. Their kids have left and got jobs in the city or gone overseas or gone away, and very, very few of them are coming back. They're people who are passionate agricultural producers and also passionate environmentalists, but it's really hard to tell by looking at them. So these are the people who are part of the Western Downs, which as a council area has decided that it's going to be the centre of renewable energy generation and production in Queensland. These are the people who are driving past solar PV arrays, and some of them are saying, gee, that looks ugly, where we would all argue, I'm sure, that that looks amazing. And so for these people, the question is, how do I integrate the things that I do on my land in a way that's sustainable and keeps me in the manner to which I'd like to become accustomed and looks after me for the future? And increasingly, for those people, it's a combination of energy production, carbon production, protection of biodiversity, water management, grains production, sheep, beef, goats, whatever. And that's really, really interesting when you are all researching this stuff and thinking about how does it work, and if we were to put large-scale solar in a lot of places west of Toowoomba, how would you build that and do that in a way that it would be more acceptable and easier for these people? The third lot, these are environmental consultants on a beach over in Western Australia. They're part of the Environment Institute of Australia and New Zealand. So these are the people who are progressing the regulatory approval of the projects that you're all providing the foundations for. And they're protecting threatened species and understanding impacts on land and handling EISs and all those other complicated things. And what they find when they work with the previous page worth of people who are landowners is that sometimes the way in which engineering and design of facilities has been developed doesn't really work very well with the land management aspirations of the community. So Talking to one of my board members recently, my fellow board members, she was saying, well, the problem we've got at the moment in Queensland with wind farms is that nobody really understood what a bench was or how big a bench was or what you could and couldn't do near it until they actually started popping up in the paddock, and then they discovered that they hadn't done the walk around properly, and one of them was in the middle of their main track, and when they moved it, the wind resource wasn't where it was meant to be and the erosion was just horrendous. So there's a really practical perspective that these people bring around impacts on land of infrastructure and assets. And the last lot is you guys. This is a slightly grown-up slide from ATSI of the recent Fellows election. So these are engineers and scientists and people, thought leaders, and I won't talk about them because you are them and you know them, and that's fantastic. So what do we need to think about? Because you can't just put yourself in the shoes and go, I now understand farmers. And it's really hard to go and talk to them. And they're not getting the same social media as you. And they're probably not even getting the same real media as you. So I think the main idea that I wanted to talk about is the idea of the energy transition being an adaptive challenge. And that's a leadership challenge that you need to manage differently than most of the ways that most of us have been taught. So I'm just going to spend a couple of minutes. How am I going for time, Roger?
We're 12 minutes in.
Perfect. Excellent. Okay, just spend a couple of minutes on what an adaptive challenge is, why it's different, how it works, and then leave you with some questions and then open up to your questions of me. So adaptive challenges, and this is literature from Harvard, so it must be true. It's also widely taught in leadership programs such as the one that I'm involved in with UQ and Oxford. It's the practice of adaptive leadership. And you're all very, very, very familiar with these things on the left-hand side. Technical challenges, where you define the problem and provide solutions. The solutions come from existing or new knowledge. You have experts, and it's mostly discrete. You can tell where your challenge begins and ends. The orientation when you're solving these problems is to clarify roles and responsibilities. So there's been a big accident, there's people hurt, the AMBOs turn up, everyone understands that the AMBOs are in charge until there are some doctors, and then the doctors are in charge. It's a technical challenge. They're resolved in relatively short timeframes, and when people start arguing with each other, there are ways that we restore order that we have used for a long time and that work. And the norm is that we maintain things. These adaptive challenges are different. And the role of leadership and the things you need to do are really, really different as well. And I'd love people to look at that list on the right-hand side and see if any of those things look like challenges that you have unintentionally found yourself facing, or roles that you've unintentionally found yourself having to take in your work because people argue or don't understand or don't want to cooperate for reasons that were a bit complicated to understand. Lots of resilience required, systems view, you've got to be able to challenge people. It's really, really different from how most of us got taught to behave, run projects and lead. And in fact, it actually requires that the people in leadership roles hold everyone in a place that's a little bit uncomfortable for a really, really, really long time. And I think this is kind of the killer slide, if you like, from the presentation. It's a bit complicated. This is the intro to the topic, not the PhD on the topic. So if you feel vaguely confused when you look at this chart, don't worry. The chart is time versus how you feel, with the top being really uncomfortable and the bottom being less uncomfortable. And in these adaptive challenges, where we need to keep people is in a place where they're a bit uncomfortable and they're learning how to move forward with this energy transition, because all of a sudden the network goes both ways, the baseload's not where it used to be, there's all this solar PV being dumped into the grid at all hours of the day and night. People are using electricity in ways that haven't been imagined, and the regulations aren't up to date, and the financial incentives don't work, and the science is new, and there are a whole bunch of different technologies. So I would argue that this is how most of us are going to feel for most of the rest of our professional lives if we're doing it right. If we start feeling relaxed and comfortable, like everything's under control, we're probably moving out of the learning that you need to be able to lead this really, really well. So what happens? We've got two lines. Hopefully you can see there's an orange one and a blue one. So the technical challenge follows the orange line. It feels really uncomfortable when you first hear of it. You work yourselves out, get your project team, get your experts, work your way through it. Really quickly, everyone starts to feel better because the experts have come and solved the problem. It's great. We're all used to that. We love that feeling. Unfortunately, the adaptive challenges don't feel like that. And they feel like sometimes it's just all too much, and sometimes it's getting easier and we're making progress, and sometimes it looked like we'd sorted it all out and then it got worse again. And of course, in social systems, the thing that happens is people try to get out of uncomfortable circumstances. They leave jobs, or they blame other people, or they come up with absurd ideas that aren't going to work. They try and get out of the zone of productive disequilibrium because it kind of feels weird, and that's a problem. You would, of course, have seen some of these actions in the topic of energy transition. People are avoiding the work. So for a very, very long time, big carbon-producing companies avoided talking about and progressing the energy transition because I'm an oil producer. I'm not an energy producer. Or I'm a gas producer. I'm not an energy producer. There's been a lot of displacement of responsibility. Been looking for big people to fix it. And I heard a fantastic talk late last week from Richard Heath from the CRC for Net Zero Agriculture, and he talked about the idea of, yeah, but what about? And his point was, he was saying all the people who say, yeah, but what about, are actually avoiding whatever work they could personally be doing right now that would make a difference by deflecting it to other people and making it other people's responsibility. So there's been an awful lot, particularly in Australia, of externalising the enemy, attacking authority, blaming policy tools, killing the messages, scapegoating. I don't know how many Prime Ministers we've gone through, but it's quite a lot on this topic. And one of the reasons for that is the systematic nature of this challenge. So that's adaptive leadership. How do you keep people in that zone of productive disequilibrium, and how do you help them work through their challenges as they do that? Well, luckily, Ron Heifetz and the colleagues who did this work also did some work on what you can do about it. I'm just going to touch briefly on each of these. You can take what you will of them, and then I'll leave you with some questions. So the first thing is to be able to hold the balcony and the dance floor perspective. You have to be able to step back and look at the whole system, be thoughtful about where you intervene, and then dive into the detail of whatever your work is. You want to be able to name the challenge. So I have another role that involves working with some people who are not always thrilled with each other. Part of the naming of the adaptive challenge is to say this work is hard, and it will be harder if we fight with each other about how we're doing it. So let's do some work on how we can productively collaborate rather than just going and fighting, because it's going to keep going for 25 years and you run out of people to fight with. The third one is regulating distress. You actually have to be quite attuned to where people are emotionally, because someone who pops out the top becomes a bullying claim, or an employee who leaves, or someone who isn't able to achieve their potential because they felt that they were not appreciated enough for the work that they were doing. You have to be able to keep disciplined attention. You know, everyone here who's involved in capital projects knows how important it is to spend time. The gentleman from APA yesterday was talking about this. You know, spend time in the planning phase, get the most experienced engineering and construction team that you can possibly get, and then when you are in construction, move through that as quickly as you possibly can, because that's how you minimise the number of things that go wrong. Giving the work back to the people. The leadership role is not double-checking and triple-checking and due diligence on the work of your engineering team. It can't be. So as a board member, my role is to create an organisation that is able to run power stations and run capital projects and negotiate with the energy markets. It's not to do those things for them. And as soon as I start trying to do those things for them, the whole system gums up and it all gets harder and slower. And the last one is really, really important, which is protecting the voices from below. And that means protecting the people who are working for you, protecting the people who are developing as leaders and knowledge workers of the future so that they are able to achieve their potential. And sometimes that means actually intervening to say to people, look, you just need to focus on this little bit and we'll make sure that the middle manager or the general manager or the chief executive doesn't come and ask you 10 million questions because then they're more able to work. So, what does it mean for you? Why have I put this talk together? I got asked by Paul and Adrian in the preparation to prepare something that you wouldn't ordinarily have thought about, and hopefully I've met the brief. But just in terms of questions for you then, the next thing that you do, the next thing that you discover, when's it going to be? Oh, no, they didn't turn me off yet, that's good. When's it going to be ready? And are the next users ready to receive it? Do you know who they are? Have you thought about them in discovering what you've discovered and developing what you've developed and doing what you do? And probably the last one to leave you with is, beyond your immediate role, what responsibility or role can you see for yourself in helping this energy transition to happen more effectively? So that's the end of my talking bit. You might want to ask some questions, perhaps.
Great. Thank you very much, Kimberly. Okay, really interesting, engaging talk there. Thanks, Kimberly. We've got a roving mic, so if you've got a question, please put up your hand. But while the mic is looking for someone to ask a question, I'll ask you a question, Kimberly.
Thank you.
So, most of us are researchers, very focused on our particular part of the problem. What is the best avenue to take to influence the transition? Should we be writing letters to our MPs, engaging on social media, mainstream media? Are there particularly fruitful or effective methods that are good for researchers to engage with?
It's such a great question, and it's one that occupies ATSI's sort of thoughts in terms of what it chooses to spend its time doing. I think the best answer is twofold. You've got to be comfortable with it, and it's got to be useful. So the very first thing I'd say is that if someone's encouraging you to do something and you really don't feel comfortable about it, like, don't try and do it because you're going to do it badly. So, you know, for some people, and it'll change over the course of your life. So for some people, it'll be community-based volunteering. For some people, it'll be having different dinner party conversations. For some people, it'll be when you're out on your park run, chatting to someone who you don't usually chat to and finding out about their perspective. It might be going to a field trip or a visit that you wouldn't usually go to. It might be coming out to Croxdale, which is one of our producer demonstration sites for the CRC for net zero emissions. Have a look at some cows, have a look at the landscape, have a little think about what that might mean.
So maybe get a little bit out of your comfort zone. Get into that zone of discomfort, which I'm more comfortable to know that it's okay to be in that zone.
Yeah, absolutely. And then the second thing is, like, don't waste your energy doing things that anyone could do. You have really, really special skills and capabilities. So working out how to bring those into the room in however you're engaging really matters a lot.
We've got Vicky and then Rebecca.
Fantastic. Thanks, Vicky.
Thanks, Kimberly. That was fantastic, interpreting the theory and putting it into meaningful examples. Thanks for your talk. That was great. Sorry, Vicky McLeod from the Energy Transition Centre, Queensland University of Technology. I've got a question. How do I put this? There's a perception that Queensland is closed for business for renewable energy projects. There's definitely a zone of discomfort for proponents, but also policymakers and things. So in a federated state, you know, with the states, it's easier for project developers just to go somewhere else. I think that's a real missed opportunity for Queensland, and as a Queenslander, I'm constantly engaging with communities and doing that work. Sure, they're putting on solar PV systems, but transmission and, you know, blowing up coal-fired power stations. So I was just wondering if you could see a path through, if you don't mind treating that political landmine for us today.
Yeah, thank you. And I do need to say that as a board member of CS Energy, which is a government-owned corporation, I can explain government policy. I can't critique government policy. But what I will say is that the government's made it very, very clear that they are open for private capital to come into the market for renewable energy, and they're working very, very hard to enable that to happen in ways that it hasn't happened before. They're also keen to use the legacy assets for as long as is financially sensible. And I think that the question about how long is financially sensible is a very difficult question to answer, but also one that's not easily intuitively understood. So one of the things we've been doing at CS with our recent upgrades is talking about the value of the investment that's being put into them. So our most recent upgrade at Callide C3 was an $80 million investment for 250,000 hours of work, which is required every 3 or 4 years to keep that asset running. And that was a small one. So we have 5 generators like that need to get turned off and worked on like that in order for them to continue. So the simplicity of it's very easy to extend coal is kind of not that simple. It's very difficult to make money out of coal. So I can't comment on the government's commitment to net zero or any policy positions of anyone. But I think what I would say is that the transition is well progressed and is inevitable because the physical risks of climate change are accumulating everywhere in the world. And so, as my good friend from one of the risk firms says, it kind of doesn't matter what one political leader in the United States thinks about climate change. Like, it's real, it's here, it's being costed. There is no alternative but to do an energy transition. So, you know, we've still got a lot of projects here in Queensland, and I think the government's keen for more. They just don't want to pay for them.
Sorry, I probably ask quick question. Thank you so much for your inspiring talk and your thoughts about how to engage the, research to be engaged with different stakeholders. I really like your slides, your almost last slide, the 3 questions for researchers, because that aligns with the network we're driving quite well, because we also think that for future innovations, we need to engage with end users, really understand what are the stakeholders they want, and we try to bring the potential example projects and partnership in front of the other bodies and talk about what we should do together, and also potentially inform policy, etc. So I would like personally take this advantage while you are here in our conference, want to ask you regarding Queensland, for example, how we should better promote our network, which we announced today, but also how we could possibly work together with some Queensland-based entities to really drive the innovation example projects in Queensland.
Yeah, it's a great question, and we might also continue that conversation when we have a break afterwards. But just at the very, very highest level, I'm sure that Queensland's very much open for business in that regard. And I think the thing that's interesting is, what do consumers want? They want it to be easy. They want it to be cheap. They want it to work. They sort of don't care. Like, I've got solar panels on my roof, and I have no idea what kind they are. I don't know how big my battery is. I know that my bill's much smaller than it used to be, and that the system works perfectly. But I also know that the day that an electrician put in a new switchboard and put something the wrong way round and started charging my battery from the grid, I got really unhappy really quickly because of the time of day that it was charging at. So I think there's lots of ways to engage with consumers, and some of them are Queensland-based and some of them are AER and the consumer associations and those kinds of things.
We're going to have to move on, I'm afraid, but let's thank Kimberly one more time
Thanks,
for her
Roger.
presentation. Thank you.